Space. There's a reason they call it the final frontier. One is that Star Trek is really popular and awesome, and yes, I don't care what you say. But another is that, well, it is. Where do you go after space? Mario went into space 10 years ago, and it's taken until now to really get to the next step. But with the conclusion of the Freeza arc, Dragon Ball had done space. 2 whole arcs, not a small chunk of time, had been spent either dealing with aliens visiting Earth, or our characters visiting another planet, while dealing with other aliens not native to the planet they were visiting. Not only that, but the villain was so strong, the power-up was so legendary, and the stakes so planet-destroyingly huge. How could Dragon Ball go back home to Earth and possibly top that? Well, it turns out that Toriyama's answer in going forward was to go back to the past. In more ways than one. Before I get started, I'd like to go over a couple of things, just check in on things that some of the recent Dragon Ball Dissection videos have made me think I need to address. We're down to the final 2 scores of Dragon Ball Dissection, which are a 3 and a 1. Not too positive, relatively speaking, so I just wanted to give a friendly reminder that while I present a lot of facts here, and those facts are instrumental in forming and backing up my opinions, Dragon Ball Dissection is primarily that, an opinion-based series. It is my review and analysis, and the opinions contained within are purely my own. You can watch Dragon Ball Dissection without agreeing with everything I have to say. I dare say you are free to enjoy Dragon Ball Dissection, even if you don't agree with me. This is just what I think, and I know my opinions are not always in lockstep with the majority. I've heard many people say over the years that this series has altered their own views on parts of the series, and that is very flattering. It suggests that I'm doing a good job of arguing my points. But if you like the Cell and Buu arcs, you don't have to feel compelled to be swayed by what I'm saying, and my goal is not to make you like them any less. All I hope is that you are entertained, whether you agree or not, and that maybe I'll give you something new to think about. And hey, I like the Cell and Buu arcs too. My scores are not an objective scale of good and bad where 10 is perfect and 1 is worthless. They are scored in relation to each other. So all 10 really means is that I feel it's better than the other 9, and all 1 means is that I feel it's worse than the other 9. But that's just what I think. And to prove that I'm no better than anybody else, that I am a flawed human being, I need to issue a small correction. Again. I do my best to be accurate, but sometimes mistakes slip by me, and oh geez, how I hate it, just having my imperfections dangling out there on the internet all pink and naked. But I gotta own up to them. In the Freeza arc part 12, I complain about Freeza calling out percentages when he powers up to his maximum. I still stand by most of what I said about that, but it has been brought to my attention that that is a fairly common trope in wuxia, the martial arts fantasy genre to which Dragon Ball belongs. That means it was incorrect for me to say that Freeza doing so is breaking away from the fantasy elements. That doesn't change that I still don't care for the trope in general. Number counting one's spiritual prowess feels about as mystical to me as midi-chlorians. And trope or not, genre convention is no excuse for poor storytelling. I contend it still is because the point in characters doing that in this genre is to show their pinpoint mastery of ki, so as I said then, Freeza is the last character who should be doing something like that since he can't even read ki to begin with. But I was still leading from a false premise, so in all fairness I have to point that out. So now whether you're thinking, that's some interesting stuff, but I hope he gets to the Cell arc soon, or this isn't remotely interesting, can he just get on with the Cell arc soon? We're getting to the Cell arc right now. Want me to start with something positive? Oh, I'll give you something positive. I think the Cell arc has the absolute best opening of any arc in the series. Freeza on Earth. The gang coming together to face him despite knowing they're completely screwed. The characters who hadn't been present for the Freeza fight unable to even process how Gohan and the others fought something like this. And then this mysterious young man with a sword showing up, becoming a Super Saiyan, and then slicing Freeza in half like it's nothing. What? How? And then the young man is simply a courier, warning of a threat so huge even he can do nothing about it. That is how you set up a story. That is how you build tension. That is how you get the audience curious and excited about what's to come. That is how you establish an Earth-based story can be just as intense as everything that's happened in space. If there was a consensus of top 10 iconic Dragon Ball moments, Trunks, the mysterious young man, bearing down on Freeza with his sword, would definitely be on it. For those who say it diminishes Freeza, I'd say no. Resurrection F diminishes Freeza. I don't think this does, or at least not any more than every villain is diminished by every other succeeding villain. Then again, I was never one to make fun of Raditz for supposedly being weak. I mean, in his moment, he was unstoppable. The fact that other villains stronger than him show up doesn't really diminish that. The fact that Nappa and Vegeta call him weak is just there to make the heroes crap their pants. Likewise, Frieza being outclassed now doesn't take away from his story, and that's because it's being used for a legitimate purpose. It's not here to suckle the money tea to Frieza's popularity or play on nostalgia. He's here to definitively establish how terrifying this new threat is. If even the guy who can manhandle Freeza of all people can't do anything about this new threat, that says much more than any exposition could. It also serves as a nice contrast to how the Saiyan and Frieza arcs handled such things. The Saiyan arc presents the characters as far too at ease and overconfident, as half of them had never directly engaged in a battle to save the planet. They treat it like a tournament. With a little more experience under their belts, they are now justifiably terrified. The Frieza arc opens on a somber note with lots of exposition and planning and scheming. It's very downbeat. This opens on action, but action that is necessary for setting the stage. I'm not saying one approach is inherently better or worse than the other. On the contrary, I'm saying I'm glad that Toriyama has done his best to mix it up, to give each arc its own identity when it comes to similar events. It's also so inspiring to see the gang, sans Goku, although he'll be along shortly, back together again after being separated for so long. It almost makes you believe that all the characters are going to be integral to this story. Oh? That was a bit backhanded? That's right, I'm still being positive. I like that they even take a moment for an important character interaction. When Tenshinhan arrives and sees Vegeta, he gets right up in his face and even questions how Yamcha can live with him. And I really wish Yamcha had given an answer because that begs an answer. Honestly, it's a huge elephant in the room that deserves more discussion than just this one line, but we'll get to that later. The Scouter makes its last appearance here when a minion believes Trunks has suppressed battle power and gets killed for it. But in a nice show of thematic significance, the last number we see a Scouter read is 5, which is the same number we first saw in a Scouter. Now can I criticize? Yes? Okay, good. Ahem. If you want to list anything as an example that diminishes Frieza, it's the Great King Cold. Now, when I complain about all the Frieza clones that have infested Dragon Ball like herpes, I don't usually include him. Sure, he does look quite a bit like second form Frieza, but he's not really fulfilling the Frieza role. I'd be hard-pressed to say he really fills any role, and I honestly don't even know what he's doing in this story. Did we really need him? I mean, yes, it's cute that Frieza has someone to call Papa. And yes, even the Frieza arc established that Frieza would indeed have parents. His only real function is to give Frieza someone to exposit to, and that could have been just as easily served by any old minion, which, hey, I'll give Resurrection F credit for that. Cole just overcomplicates things. He muddles things. And first off, let's just look only at the story here, not in any of the guidebooks. So, he's the king, and not just the king, but the Great King. So, Frieza's a prince, so there's a monarchy involved now? Is that separate from the planet-conquering organization that Frieza runs? Or is it the planet-conquering organization? If it is, does that mean that Frieza's not in charge of it? That he's just middle management? Is Cold really the guy in charge? Frieza is singularly terrifying through his own arc, but there's another guy just right there in his own home who presumably can rival him? In fact, Cold mentions their clan, so who knows how many Friezas are out there. Well, that's just lame. Then again, Cold asks Trunks to join his clan to be his son in Frieza's place. So maybe this isn't even a biological family, but just a bunch of strong guys who get together for Thanksgiving to see whose constipated screams of powering up can cook the turkey first. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. How am I not being totally inconsistent here, saying that it's good that Frieza's being trivialized for the sake of this new threat, but it's bad that he's being trivialized for the sake of his dad? And the answer is, well, because the former is being done for the sake of the story. The latter is being done to justify Cold being there. But Cold doesn't need to be there. The only reason Freeza is here is to show that sense of scale. Cold doesn't bring anything to the table, he's not a threat, he just shows up and dies, leaving nothing but a bunch of head-scratching frustrations that are never going to be answered in the story because this was never their story to begin with. And it retroactively makes Freeza less important in his own story if we're now questioning whether he was even the guy in charge in the first place. Frieza's good. Cold sucks a big ol' ice cube. As for the use of characters in this prologue, well, you might accuse me of reaching because it's not something I ever noticed until this read-through. But I really feel like Toriyama's trying to distance himself from Yamcha, Tenshinhan, and Chaozu by subtly belittling them throughout this. It's one of those things where I'm tempted to pull out a Mr. Plinkett, "You might not have noticed, but your brain did." Like how, right after Tenshinhan confronts Vegeta, Vegeta chews all three of them out for not bothering to mask their ki, and how they didn't even notice Piccolo was there until Vegeta pointed it out. Because, it's not like those three knew how to sense and suppress ki before Vegeta did or anything. Obviously, he has to school them in that. Then when Trunks tries to befriend them, Gohan, Krillin, and Bulma are the only ones who accept him immediately. Piccolo is pretty much ignored here because he's largely antisocial anyway. Puar actually just completely disappears from the scene. I mean, why did Toriyama even bring him along if he wasn't going to contribute anything? Vegeta has a legitimate grievance against him because he claims to be a Saiyan, even though that should be impossible. But Yamcha, Tenshinhan, and Chaozu are actively shown not to trust him just because, I guess. I mean, okay, Tenshinhan's kind of standoffish too, and Chaozu can't go to the bathroom without Tenshinhan's approval, although, he does eventually accept a soda from Trunks. But Yamcha's an easygoing guy. He even accepts Vegeta with no problem, despite Vegeta being tangentially responsible for his death. But he doesn't trust the guy who just killed Freeza for them. I don't want everybody to be in lockstep about this mysterious kid, but it does seem suspect to me that it's specifically these three, forming a single-panel chorus of dissent, who don't seem to like him for no reason. It's obvious we're intended to like Trunks, and so we like the characters who accept Trunks. It just seems like Toriyama might be marginalizing them on purpose, so we care about them less. Actually, I'm totally convinced he's marginalizing Yamcha to make us care about him less, but that's for part 2. As for this, then again, this is Toriyama, so it was probably just careless happenstance. I need somebody besides Vegeta to distrust Trunks. Those three, what are their names again? Tao, Pai Pai, Dim Sum, and Chi Chi or something? They haven't done anything in a while, and I don't really have anything for them to do now. Might as well have them do it. Oh, and for anyone still thinking that Piccolo really needed to be on Namek fighting Frieza so he could connect to his roots, he flat out tells Gohan he doesn't give a crap about any of them or their boring lifestyle. And this is after he's assimilated someone who's lived his entire life there. But just when Trunks predicts a space pod arrives and inside is Goku. But Goku has no idea who Trunks is. And everyone is completely floored by this, despite the fact that Trunks already told them that he and Goku don't know each other. What a stunning cliffhanger! Honestly, I'd say it's pretty consistent with the intelligence these characters are about to display. But we're going to have to wait just a bit to find out who this mysterious warrior is because Toei Animation just can't stop keeping the Frieza torch burning. Freezing. Analogies. But I guess if Frieza and his dad bit the dust just a bit too soon for you, Toei has you covered by making a whole movie about Frieza's similar sounding, similar looking, just all around similar brother. Send in the clones!